Understand what Gordon and Schuart did, you have to understand what they were doing there. Task Force Ranger had deployed to Mogadishu in August 1993 under Major General William F. Garrison. Their mission was narrow and specific: capture Mohammed Farah Aidid, the warlord whose militia had killed 24 Pakistani UN peacekeepers in June. The task force was small, elite, roughly 160 men, Delta Force operators from C Squadron. Rangers from Bravo Company, 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. Night Stalkers from the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment flying MH-60 Black Hawks and A-6 and MH-6 Little Birds, and a handful of SEALs from Team 6. By October, they had run 6 successful snatch operations. The 7th would be different. At approximately 13:32 hours on October 3rd, intelligence placed 2 of Aidid's top lieutenants, Omar Salad and Mohammed Hassan Awale, inside a building near the Olympic Hotel, deep inside the Bakara market. This was Haber Gitter territory, Aidid's stronghold, a dense urban warren of unpaved streets, cinder-block buildings, and an estimated tens of thousands of armed civilians and militia. Garrison approved the raid. The plan was surgical. Fast-rope Delta operators onto the target building. Rangers form a 4-corner perimeter around it. A ground convoy of 9 Humvees and 3 5-ton trucks under Lieutenant Colonel Danny Knight rolls in, loads the prisoners, and extracts everyone home. Estimated time on target, 30 minutes. 19 aircraft launched. The prisoners were secured within minutes. And then, at approximately 16:20 hours, a rocket-propelled grenade, an RPG-7 fired from a rooftop, struck the tail rotor assembly of Super 6-1, a Black Hawk piloted by Chief Warrant Officer 3 Cliff Walcott. The aircraft went into a flat spin and crashed 5 blocks northeast of the target building. Walcott and his co-pilot Donovan Briley were killed on impact. But that was only the opening move. Because 20 minutes later, a second RPG would change the course of American Special Operations forever. At approximately 16:40 hours, a second Black Hawk Super 6-4, piloted by Chief Warrant Officer 3 Michael Durant with co-pilot Ray Frank and crew chiefs Bill Cleveland and Tommy Field, took an RPG to the tail. The rotor held for a moment. Then it sheared off entirely. Durant fought the aircraft down into a narrow alley approximately 1 mile southwest of the primary crash site. Here is where the situation collapsed. The task force was already fully committed to the first crash. Combat search and rescue teams were fighting street by street to reach Walcott's wreckage. The ground convoy under Knight was lost in the maze of Mogadishu streets, taking devastating fire, unable to reach either site. And a Somali crowd, witnesses estimated between 50 and several hundred armed men, was closing on Durant's downed helicopter at a run. Circling above in Super 6-2, a Black Hawk piloted by Mike Gaffina were Master Sergeant Gary Gordon and Sergeant First Class Randy Schuart, both Delta Force, both snipers, both attached to the mission as air-to-ground marksmen. They watched through their scopes as the mob converged on Durant's crash. They knew what was coming. Gordon keyed his radio. He requested permission from Task Force Ranger Command to be inserted on the ground to defend the crash site. Denied. Garrison and his staff needed to see if a QRF, a quick reaction force, could reach the site conventionally. Gordon asked again. The mob was closer now. Denied again. Gordon asked a 3rd time. This is what makes this moment different from every other last stand in American military history. He was not ordered in. He was not swept in by circumstance. He knew with the precision of a Delta operator who had studied Mogadishu for weeks exactly what was waiting for him on that street. He asked to go anyway, and on the 3rd request, Garrison approved it. If this is landing, save this video. You will want to come back to this one. Gaffina brought Super 6-2 down to about 5 feet above the ground, about 100 meters from Durant's crash. There was no clear landing zone. Gordon and Schuart jumped. They carried their sniper rifles, a CAR-15 for Gordon, an M14 for Schuart, and pistols. Between them, they had 2 long guns, 2 handguns, and the ammunition on their bodies. They fought their way through the alleys to Durant's wreckage. When they arrived, Durant was still strapped in his seat. His back was broken. His leg was broken. The other 3 crew members were badly wounded or dead. Gordon pulled Durant from the cockpit and laid him beside the aircraft. He handed him a loaded MP5 submachine gun taken from inside the Black Hawk and said, "This is Durant's own recollection. Good luck." Then Gordon and Schuart moved to establish a defensive perimeter around the crash. What happened next defied every rule of small unit combat. 2 men, against a moving wall of Haber Gitter militia and armed civilians estimated by later intelligence assessments and Durant's own testimony to number in the hundreds. Gordon and Schuart circled the wreckage, firing in disciplined single shots. They dropped attackers in the alley mouths. They shifted positions to prevent themselves from being flanked. They kept the perimeter of the crash site clear for what witnesses on the ground and pilots overhead have all described as an astonishing length of time. Sometime in that fight, Gary Gordon was hit. Accounts differ on the exact wound, but he was mortally struck while continuing to engage. Before he died, he handed his Car 15 and the remaining 5 magazines to Durant with the words, "There are 5 magazines left. Good luck." Then Gordon returned fire until he was killed. Randy Shewhart continued alone. He moved around the aircraft, engaging targets from multiple angles to give the illusion that the crash was still being defended by a larger force. He held the perimeter for an unknown additional period, long enough that when the Somalis finally overran the crash, they moved cautiously, still expecting resistance. Shewhart was killed on the west side of the aircraft. His rifle was found empty. Michael Durant, alone, broken-backed, and holding the Car 15 Gordon had handed him, fired until the weapon jammed. The mob reached the wreckage. They killed Cleveland and Field. They pulled Durant from beside the aircraft. And for reasons that had nothing to do with mercy and everything to do with the intervention of a local militia commander named Yusuf Dahir Maalim, who realized a live American pilot was worth more than a dead one, Durant was not killed. He was carried away as a prisoner. He would be held for 11 days before being released. Gordon and Shewhart's bodies were desecrated and dragged through the streets of Mogadishu. The footage went around the world. The Battle of Mogadishu cost 18 American dead and 73 wounded. Somali casualties are still debated. Estimates range from several hundred to over 1,000 killed. But the 2 names that came out of that fight and stayed in the American military's consciousness were Gordon and Shewhart, because of what they chose, because of the third request. On May 23, 1994, President Bill Clinton awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously to Master Sergeant Gary Ivan Gordon and Sergeant First Class Randall David Shewhart. Their families received the medals at the White House. It was the first Medal of Honor awarded to any American soldier since the Vietnam War, 21 years. Their citations remain among the most unusual in the medal's history, because they specifically note that both operators knew there was no ground rescue possible. They knew. The Battle of Mogadishu itself reshaped American military thinking almost immediately. Within days, President Clinton announced the withdrawal of American forces from Somalia. Task Force Ranger was pulled home, and the concept of mission creep entered permanent Pentagon vocabulary, but the tactical lessons cut deeper. Every after-action review of the battle asked the same questions. Why were there no AC-130 Spectre gunships overhead? Assets General Garrison had specifically requested and been denied by Secretary of Defense Les Aspin. Why did the ground convoy lack armored vehicles? Why was there no coordinated QRF plan for a downed aircraft in a hostile urban environment? The Aspin decision, refusing the AC-130s and the M1 Abrams and Bradley armor the task force commanders wanted, became one of the most studied civilian military failures in modern American history. Aspin resigned in December 1993. The Army's doctrine on downed aircraft recovery in urban terrain was rewritten. The 160th SOAR revised its tactics for helicopter operations over hostile cities. And the Special Operations community began the long institutional argument that continues to this day. Did Gordon and Shewhart's insertion save Michael Durant's life? Or did Command's initial hesitation cost the 2 of them theirs? Historians and operators genuinely disagree. Some argue that Garrison should have approved the first request instantly, that the delay narrowed the window when a 2-man team could have held the site until relief arrived. Others argue that the third denial was correct in principle, that no commander should send men into what looks like a suicide mission, and that Gordon and Shewhart's insistence is precisely what makes their action extraordinary. Both views appear in official Army histories. Drop in the comments, do you think Command should have approved the first request, or was the third-time approval the correct call? I want to hear it. CTA 1213 Min. If you want more stories like this, real operators, real decisions, the moments where doctrine failed and men made choices that rewrote the rulebook, subscribe to WarDossier and hit the bell icon. New battle every Wednesday. Named commanders, real casualty figures. The moments the after-action reports actually turn on. This channel is being built one operator, one battle, one turning point at a time, and the next one you don't want to miss. Outro 1315 Min. Here is the lesson from an alley in Mogadishu on October 3, 1993. Courage in combat is not the absence of understanding. Gordon and Shewhart understood exactly what they were asking for. They had trained for years in the specific skill of urban sniping. They had rehearsed the exact scenario of defending a downed aircraft. They knew the streets. They knew the weapons on the other side. They knew the numbers, and they asked 3 times to go anyway. Not because they miscalculated, because they calculated correctly and they went anyway. That is why the Medal of Honor citation reads the way it does. That is why the story survives. Michael Durant survived his captivity and returned to fly for the 160th SOAR again. Gary Gordon's name is on the C Squadron Memorial Wall at Fort Bragg. Randy Schuart's name is beside his. The Bakara market still stands. The alley where Super 6-4 went down is still there. If this one hit, my video on Operation Eagle Claw, the 1980 Desert One disaster that led directly to the creation of the 160th SOAR and Delta's evolution into what deployed to Mogadishu, will blow your mind. That is where this story really begins. Watch it next. Timestamps: 00, 00 the third request 00, 15 Task Force Ranger in Somalia 03, 00 the Bakara Market Trap 06, 00 90 minutes in the alley 09, 00 the Medal, the Doctrine, the Argument 12, 00 subscribe for more 13, 00 the lasting legacy military history Black Hawk Down Delta Force Medal of Honor Mogadishu.